Good afternoon. This is Katherine, and I will be reporting the introduction of our data analysis project. This project was made by Elaine, Siobhan, Elisa, Santino, and me, myself, Katherine. So I'm going to start with the data background and description. For our final project, we focused on a data set that shows the top 10 albums from the year from 1990 to 2021. This data set shows the albums, genres, artists, and many different other variables that I'll get into later. This data set also allows us to explore different connections between variables. For example, some ideas include the popularity of genres per year, the amount of times artists were in the top 10, the years that artists were popular, and the pictures on the slides that I chose for this snapshot give the number one album some select years that I personally found interesting. And just from this little glance, we can see that Adele was had the number one album in both year 2015 and 2021, which I didn't expect for myself. And I didn't think of Adele as that popular. However, this data set proves otherwise. And this finding was possible due to data analysis. So this leads me into my next point of the motivation behind choosing this data set. And as you can see, this data is very intriguing as it relates to popular culture. Furthermore, this data isn't outdated as it shows the top 10 albums from the most recent year of 2021, which makes it even more intriguing and relevant to us now. And furthermore, we all love music. However, we all listen to different genres of music. So this data set allows us to look at music in a more objective way since it's showing us the top 10 from each year instead of specifically the music we just listened to, which could have caused our data to be biased. So now I'll go into the description of variables. So we have both numeric and categorical variables. For our numeric variables, they include ranking, worldwide sales, minutes, and tracks. So for ranking, the ranking variable ranks the albums from 1 to 10, depending on the other albums within that year. The worldwide sales variable was named worldwide.sales.est, and this gives us the estimated number of worldwide sales for that album. And then we have the minutes variable, which shows us the album length, specifically in minutes. And lastly, the tracks variable shows us the number of tracks within that album. And then we have our categorical variables, and these include genre, artist, album, and year. So for a genre variable, this will sort the album based on the type of genre that it is, for example, like pop, rock, hip hop, a bunch of different other ones as well. So you can also see that it does not discriminate against any certain type of genre. And then we also have artist, which would either be in their full name or stage name, depending on what's more applicable. And then we have the album, which would give the album name, of course. And then we have the year that it was made, which ranges from 1990 to 2021 again. And now we'll move on to Elaine with data preparation and summary.
Thanks, Catherine. Hello, my name is Elaine, and I'm here to talk to you about the preparation and summary of our data. Here we see the befores and afters of the data cleaning process. As Catherine said, we chose to stick with 8 variables, 4 numerical and 4 categorical. We decided to subset the original data and remove the CD variable. We also mutated the album length or minutes variable. Originally, it was in hours and minutes that were separated by a colon. We decided it would be most efficient to change the album length from hours and minutes to only minutes. We also renamed the column from album length to minutes. Finally, we mutated the worldwide sales column. Along with the colon, the comma is not a symbol that our language understands, so we removed the commas. As you can see, there are 3 numerical variables summarized. In the summary of the worldwide sales variable, we see that the smallest number of sales was $1,909,009. The highest amount of sales was $45 million. The mean, which is the calculated average amount of sales, is $10,705,073. The first incretile and the third incretile are the middle values of the lower half of the variable and the higher half of the variable. The first incretile for the sales is $5 million, and the third incretile is $14 million. The median is the organized middle number for the entire variable. As we see here, the median for the worldwide sales variable is $8,276,933. For the tracks variable, we see that the smallest number of tracks on an album is 6, the highest number of tracks is 67, the average amount of tracks is about 14 tracks, the first incretile is 12, and the third incretile is 15 tracks. The median or middle number is 13. Finally, for the minutes variable, the shortest album time was about 19.5 minutes. The longest album time was 304 minutes, which is about 5 hours long. The average time for an album was 56.5 minutes. The first incretile is about 44 minutes, and the third incretile is about 65 minutes, which is 1 hour and 5 minutes. Now we're going to shift and talk about the summaries of the categorical variables. On the left, we see the answer to the question, how often did each genre occur in the top 10 of each year? So we have a summary of the genre variable by using the two-way table that compares year and genre. On the right, we see a list of artists that appeared in the top 10 more than once. For context, there are many more artists than these ones. However, these are the more frequent ones. Regarding the other two categorical variables, year and album, they are more self-explanatory. There are only 21 years, and they all appear the same amount of times. As for the album variable, there is only one of each. And now we're going to go over to Santino to talk about the data visualization.
Thanks, Elaine. I'm Santino Martella, and I'm going over data visualization. The first question we asked while analyzing our data was what genres have ranked in the top 10 most often. Find out, we created a bar graph that showed us how many times each genre appeared in the top 10. The graph showed us that pop appeared most often, followed by rock, then hip hop, country, R&B, world, and classical. We also saw that blues, EDM, and jazz were the genres that, while did occur at least once in the top 10, were seen the least. Next, we wanted to see if there was a trend in the number of tracks that these top 10 albums had within them. And if there was a trend, how many songs did most of these albums have within them? So we created a histogram. The histogram revealed to us that most of the albums in the top 10 seem to have about 10 to 16 tracks. The histogram also displayed a positive skew, with the curve's tail moving towards longer albums. After that, we created a side-by-side box plot to show us which genre of albums tended to be the longest in minutes. It turned out that jazz was the longest, followed by classical, hip-hop, and R&B. These were the genres with the longest medium album length. We also found that EDM and pop had the shortest median album length. We also noted that pop had both the longest album with over 5 hours of music and shortest album. Next, we wondered how much in recent years an album's rating correlated to the album's worldwide sales. So we asked the question, did higher ranked albums since 2010 actually sell better, or were they just higher rated? We created a facet-wrapped line graph to answer this question and realized that albums that were rated higher did actually sell much better than albums that were rated lower. However, we saw something strange. In most years, the top 3 albums or so greatly outperformed the rest of the albums in sales. However, starting in 2018, the top albums only sold slightly better than the lower ranked albums. and the difference between the sales in the best album versus the number 10 album were much less dramatic. To further examine this odd occurrence, we created a scatter plot that looked at if higher ranked albums in general from 1990 to 2021, which is our entire data set, sold better or were just higher rated. This graph confirmed that usually higher ranked albums did sell better, and that 2018 to 2021 have been anomalies. After that, we wanted to take a deeper dive into the music scene of 2020. We wanted a graph that would show us the sales, number of tracks, genre, and ranking for each of the albums. We created a bubble plot that accomplished all these goals. The color of each bubble shows us the genre, with red corresponding to hip-hop, green corresponding to pop, and blue corresponding to R&B. The Y value shows us the sales, the X value shows us the ranking, and the size shows us the number of tracks for each song. Using this information, we made some observations. First, it seemed that hip-hop and pop were the two most popular genres in 2022. Second, we noticed that most albums had generally 12 to 16 tracks in them. Additionally, we saw that while pop had the number 1 ranking, there were more hip-hop songs in the top 10 in 2020 than pop songs. Lastly, we wanted to see which artists had their albums in the top 10 the most number of times. To easily view this, we created a word cloud that had the name of all the artists with the size of their name increasing the more times their album appeared in the top 10. Some of the artists seen the most include BTS, Taylor Swift, Drake, Eminem, U2, and Mariah Carey. Looking closely at the smaller names, we are also able to determine which artists appeared less often, or maybe even only once. These artists include Blackpink, Meatloaf, Miley Cyrus, and Pop Smoke. That finishes up data visualization, so we're going to head over to Siobhan with regression.
Thanks, Santino. Now we're going to go on to regression. Now I know this looks a little bit foggy with all these numbers breathing heavily right here, but don't worry, I'm going to break it all down and clear that fog. Now, in the simple regression model, I chose to predict how many minutes an album is based on the number of tracks it holds. In the summary of my model, the coefficients can be seen. These numbers will be helpful in interpreting the equation y equals b plus mx. First, we will start with the b, or the y-intercept, which is 8.6663. The y-intercept is where the line crosses the y-axis, or if easier understood, the y when x equals 0. In my model, it predicts that when an album has 0 tracks, it would be about 8 minutes long. This is one of the cases where the y-intercept does not really make sense, because in a real-life setting, there would never be an album with 0 tracks, but in this model, there has to be, and so it makes the y-intercept unsound. But now we'll move on to another part of the equation, which is the slope. The slope tells you for every 1 unit increase in x, how much the y changes, increasing or decreasing. The slope would be 3.3284, the number found to the right of tracks on the summary. In our model, it means that for every 1 track, the length of an album increases by 3.3284 minutes. Now, if we put this all together, the final equation will be minutes equals 8.6663 plus 3.3284 times number of tracks. And now moving on from the equation, the next number that is important found in my summary is the R-squared value. In our model, it is 0.7229. This means that about 72.29% of the variability in the number of minutes an album is can be explained by how many tracks it holds. So in general, about 72.29% of the variability in the number of minutes an album is can be explained by this simple regression model. This is a pretty good number, so we can conclude that the fit of the data is also good. Now that I've explained the equation, I will move on to the prediction the model made. I inputted 4 different number of tracks the album could have. Those were 10, 13, 15, and 18. The model predicted that an album with 10 tracks would be 41.95 minutes long. And then with 13 tracks, it would be 51.94 minutes long. 13 tracks, 51.94 minutes long. 15 tracks, 58.58 minutes long. 18 tracks, 68.58 minutes long. And that is all I have to say for simple regression. So now we move on to the logistic regression model. Now, my logistic regression model, I built a model that would predict whether or not an album would have a ranking of 5 or 5 and above. I made a ranking of below 5 equivalent to a rating of okay, then a ranking of 5 or above equivalent to a rating of good. My initial predictor variables were year, worldwide sales, tracks, and minutes. However, when I ran the code to find the VIF values, year had a value of over 10, making it not a good predictor. Then when I ran these in AIC, it took out all the it took out the variables track and minutes. This makes sense because of how strongly these two are correlated. So my final predictor variables ended up being worldwide sales and year. And in the summary of the model, the coefficients can be seen just like in simple regression model, but these numbers are interpreted differently. The numbers by year and worldwide sales are the log of the odds. So in order to interpret them, so that they make sense, they must be exponentiated and put into the percentage that is understandable. After I went through that process, I was able to interpret worldwide sales intercept as holding all other variables in the model fixed. For every one sale the album makes, the odds of that it will be ranked okay decreases by 0.00000008%. And I interpreted this in terms of the odds of it being ranked okay. Now, finally moving on to the prediction itself, I put in 200,000 for worldwide sales and 202 for the year. And for predictor variables that are not best suited and will not be taken into account in the prediction model, I put in 10 for the number of tracks and 60 for the number of minutes. Now, the prediction model predicted that this album would be ranked okay. And so that is all I have to say about logistic regression model. So I'm going to hand it over to Lisa for classification.
Thank you so much, Siobhan, for going over regression analysis. My name is Elisa, and I want to go ahead and take over and talk about some classification. So a question you guys might be having is, well, what if I have 5 predictor variables and I want to use all of them to predict one response variable? That's a very good question. The answer to that is a KNN model, or a K nearest neighbor model. So we're going to go ahead and talk about this graph in just a second, but let me go ahead and show you an example. I'll move myself up a little bit up here. Perfect. Alrighty. So our goal here is to classify the year of an album based on the number of minutes, genre, ranking, and the number of tracks it has. So our predictor variables are minutes, genre, ranking, and number of tracks. And what we're trying to predict is what year that album is from. So what the KN model does is it takes those predictor variables and the response variable, puts it in a scatter plot with all the data points and outputs. And then we're going to go ahead and make one special point. We'll call it a special point for now. And in that one special point, we're going to go ahead and put in specific values. So for example, for minutes, we want 70 minutes. Genre is classical, ranking is number 4, and there are 10 tracks. So we're going to put all that information into this one special point, plot on the scatter plot, and then KNN could go ahead and do the rest to predict our variable. And so the way that it predicts it is by looking at the surrounding scatter plots from that one special point. And so how many scatter plots do we need to look at to make an accurate prediction? Well, that's exactly what this graph does right here. So once you put in your code, you output it. This is what you're going to see. You're going to go ahead and see a graph. And so we can analyze this by looking at the x-axis and the y-axis. The x-axis shows the number of neighbors and the y-axis shows the accuracy. The number of neighbors means the amount of points that you're going to look at around the special point, and the accuracy is how accurate it will be to use that many points. And so as we see here, if we use 5 scatter plot points, then we get 0.028 accuracy, which is all right. Compare that to number 7, there's no accuracy or a very minimal amount of accuracy for using 7 scatter points, and there's a much higher amount of accuracy for number 9. Even though we use 9 scatter points, it's not the best still because we only are getting 3% accuracy. And so by looking at that, we see that, around our special point, we look at the 9 points, and we see that the prediction is that the year of that album is predicted to be 1998 based on this information that we have here. And that is it. Thank you so much for watching, and hope you learned something new. Bye-bye.